Hi, this is Scott with Spectre Gear, and for today's video we're doing another Sling 101 presentation. This is a follow-up to our last presentation wherein I talked about the universal slings. Kind of a running theme in the past couple of Sling 101 videos that I've done is talking about the importance of side mounting a sling in order for it to properly function. And I've done a range demonstration, and of course I talked again about that on the last video. And for some weapons, particularly back in the beginning when we were first making slings, there weren't a lot of weapons out there that had any kind of provision for side mounting the weapon in their factory configurations. So for a lot of those guns that still exist, we do offer a soft attachment method. In this case, it's a rear adapter. In this case, it's a stirrup type rear adapter. And as you can see here, we've got loops on both sides so that you can attach the left or right side of the stock. And of course, at the front, we have a wraparound front adapter. And like I said, we already have a number of standard configurations where we offer those adapters. And while they work quite well, I'm going to tell you that if you want the absolute best configuration to set up your sling, hard pointing that thing, attaching to a hard point on the side of the weapon is going to be the best and most efficient way of attaching a sling. Now, fortunately, now that we're more than a few years down the road, a lot of manufacturers are providing some kind of side mounting provision on the weapons that they're manufacturing. And of course, when you talk about aftermarket stocks, they're coming with a lot of really good options for side mounting slings. One of the problems, though, that comes in is knowing which kind of hardpoint adapters or connectors that you're going to need to purchase in order to side mount your sling to your weapon. Now in this case, this is a stock for a 1022 that Magpul manufactures, but it's a pretty good example of some of the different options that are available. In this case, we have a rear mounted vertical slot, so that's a pretty good setup that could already be addressed by the webbing attachment on this universal sling. But of course, when you get to the front, you're presented with just, actually, well, in its stock configuration, you have 3 M-LOK slots. Now in this case, I've attached an M-LOK QD adapter to one of the M-LOK slots, and from there I can connect at the front with a QD swivel, so long as I don't drop it. I do that a lot. There we go. And that would provide us with an attachment point at the rear and the front of the weapon. So in many cases, these aren't terribly difficult to figure out. Of course, the easiest configuration would be if you had a weapon that already was equipped with side-mounted front and rear sling swivels. In this case, you don't need to purchase anything other than just a universal sling. So that would be attached with the webbing attachments at the front and rear of the sling, and you're good to go. Conversely, if you bought a gun that came with QD swivels already attached at the front and rear of the weapon, all you would need to buy is a universal sling with QD swivels. Like, oh, there we go. So if you buy the universal sling that has QD swivels at each end, you just snap in place and you're good to go. Where the confusion comes in is when people are trying to come up with some kind of custom solution for a build that they've done. Now, I showed the early model AR-15 kind of setup, but nowadays there are a bewildering number of options when people are doing their builds, and usually they'll fall into a few different categories. But in a lot of cases, you're going to see some kind of either a rail with Picatinny rail on the front end, or you may have something that has M-LOK slots. If it's either one of those kind of configurations, we can easily set you up with something for the front of the gun. If you needed a rail-mounted front sling swivel, we have those. We have rail-mounted QD swivels, and of course we have the M-LOK QD swivel set from GG&G, and that can get you started towards coming up with an attachment at the front that will involve some kind of a QD swivel. At the rear, if it was this particular configuration and you had M-LOK slots, you buy the QD mount, you're going to need to buy a universal sling that has a QD swivel at the front. At the rear, you can utilize the vertical slot on the weapon or on the Magpul stock. Of course, I'll mention once again that when it comes to QD mounting on these Magpul stocks, one of the problems is this area is not relieved enough to be able to install the QD swivel in a vertical position. In order to get it to fit, you have to turn it. And that doesn't really carry all that well. It tends to bind up a lot and put a lot of stress on the socket. My inclination in all cases is to go with the vertical loop. But those are, again, fairly simple configurations. Where the confusion comes up, and what I mainly want to talk about today, is when we're talking about kind of a little bit different layout, or if you want to come with some kind of QD configuration for a weapon that has side-mounted swivels. So let's first talk about the one thing that tends to throw some people off, and that is if you have a weapon, let me grab an AK here, that at the front has some kind of a loop. Now in this case, this is a vertical loop. So at the opening, the loop is oriented vertically and the opening is in alignment with the bore and facing to the front of the weapon. Now if you had something like an HK, you would have a loop wherein the loop opening faces downward. Now you're going to be presented with two options for attaching to that loop, and I want to make sure that you select the proper one. We've went ahead and named them by their typical configuration, and that is the AK hook and the HK hook. And they're named this way because they pretty much work only with either one or the other weapon. In the case of the AK hook, we're looking at some kind of old tech. Now, yeah, this doesn't look terribly super modern, and these have been around for a long time, but they've been around for a long time for a reason. These things are incredibly durable. We have stressed the hell out of this thing, and we've never had one returned by a customer because it went bad, broke, or bent on them. These things are pretty darn tough. But most importantly is the way in which it's oriented. So you'll note here that the loading gate, one faces up, the other one is parallel. So in the case of the AK, this is going to attach, and you want to set this up so the loading gate is facing up. When it attaches, it allows the sling to lay flat against the side of the weapon. You get a little bit of deflection, but it's got good movement vertically, got good movement this way, fits just fine and works just fine. That's the best application for the AK. Now if I try to apply the same hook to an HK, we're going to have a problem right away. So if I hook that in, you know right away it's binding up. It's not going to allow the sling to lay against the side of the weapon, and particularly when you let the weapon hang and you're, for instance, going to a pistol transition, it's not going to hang very well. It's going to cause the weapon to turn on your body, and you're going to be fighting against it. So that's not a good application for that, but this is. And the reason being is the direction of the gate opening matches the direction of the hole opening. So in this case, it allows the sling to lay flat against the side of the weapon. You get good deflection, a little bit of good twist there. Everything's working just fine. Conversely, if I try to use the same setup on the AK, it actually will kind of work, but it doesn't kind of work very well. It can only be put on this way. If you try to put it on at the top, it's really going to be a problem. And it's not going to be the best solution. It's going to bind here continuously, and you're going to run the risk of damaging either the loop itself or the connector itself. So you want to keep those things in mind. So if you have any kind of and fortunately these aren't a terribly popular custom application. Not a lot of people are setting these up. And in fact, I kind of really had to scratch my head in bemusement because one company that we dealt with, they came up with a rail-mounted version of this HK attachment, but for some odd reason, they had the hole facing forward. But they wanted to use a sling with this kind of connection, and it never really made a heck of a lot of sense to me, and consequently that product has now since been discontinued. Probably that's the reason, but there you go. Now the one last connector that I'm going to talk about that you could possibly select, and again, just as a reminder if I didn't mention it already, what we're eventually going to have is a system set up so that you can, for custom applications, particularly on ARs and whatnot, you can select a sling, and then you can select the attachments. This video is part of explaining what attachments you're going to buy, although the page is going to have a pretty good description of each attachment and its appropriate connection point. But the last one I'll talk about is this paraclip. And this is kind of an interesting application. If you have side-mounted sling swivels and you want some kind of QD setup, this allows you to actually do that. The way the pair clip works, and it's a Magpul product, and it's a very well-made product, I like it a lot, is it's kind of designed to work with these sling swivels. And it connects just like so, works pretty well, lays flat against the side of the weapon, has an additional safety that you can press in that locks out the opening latch, and allows you to have kind of a QD setup, so you can attach your swivels at the front and the rear, lock them down, you're good to go. If you want to get the sling off in a hurry, you just open up and take off. These will also work in a limited sense with AKs. Bring the AK back out here again. Same connector, works pretty well with an AK, attaches to the hook just fine, locks in place, and it's a pretty good connection method for that. With the MP5, it's an absolute no-go. With an HK type connection, the problem right away, it won't even fit through the hole and lock down in place, so it kind of is a moot point. But that's kind of about it. We have a pretty wide selection of different mounts and different connectors that you're going to be able to buy, and then you should be able to come up with some kind of custom configuration for whatever build you've had. Of course, if you do run into any kind of a problem or you have a question, you can contact us and we can try to walk you through it. But also, you might want to take a look around the site before you start looking at a custom configuration, because we actually do have a lot of setups that can apply directly to your weapon. So we may already have something in play that's already set up for you and has a product number, and it's a turnkey option. So with that, I'll kind of bring it to a close at this point and let you know that our slings, of course, are manufactured right here in the United States of America in Visalia, California. And if you're interested in more information on these products, please contact us at spectregear.com. And with that, I will thank you for watching and or listening. Have a wonderful day.